50 square miles of American soil where the Constitution stops working, where murder, kidnapping, assault, any federal crime exists in a legal vacuum. Not because there's no law, because there's too much law, all pointing in the wrong direction. This isn't folklore. It's not an internet conspiracy. Law professor Brian Colt discovered it in 2005 and immediately contacted the authorities. 20 years later, Congress still hasn't fixed it. Welcome to the zone of death. 2004, Brian Colt wasn't looking for a loophole. He was preparing a lecture on the Sixth Amendment, the part of the Constitution that guarantees your right to a trial by jury. The language is specific. An impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. State and district. Both requirements must be met. Colt started asking himself questions. What if there was a place where these two requirements couldn't both be satisfied? Where would that even be? And then he found it. March 1st, 1872. President Ulysses S. Grant signs the Yellowstone Act, creating the world's first national park. But there's a problem nobody noticed. Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming don't exist yet as states. When these territories finally became states nearly 2 decades later, they surrendered legal authority over the park to federal jurisdiction. Sensible enough. But then Congress made a decision that would create a constitutional crisis. They assigned the entire park to the United States District Court for the District of Wyoming. All of it. Even the parts in Idaho and Montana. The only federal district in America that crosses state lines. December 2005. Just weeks after Colt publishes his article, Hunter Michael Belderain illegally shoots an elk in the Montana section of Yellowstone. Not the Idaho zone, but a similar area with very few residents. When authorities charge him with poaching, Belderain's defense cites Colt's article, word for word. He argues his Sixth Amendment rights would be violated by using a jury from outside the area where the crime occurred. The judge dismisses the argument as a harmless error. But here's what matters. Violating the Constitution can never be harmless, especially in a murder case. Imagine someone studies Colt's paper. Really studies it. They understand the geography, the jurisdictional boundaries, the constitutional requirements. They plan carefully. The Idaho portion of Yellowstone is remote. No roads lead directly there. Cell service is non-existent. The nearest ranger station is miles away. If someone wanted to commit a crime without witnesses, it's nearly perfect. But the real protection isn't the isolation. It's the Constitution itself. A defendant could stand before a judge and say, "Your Honor, I have the right to a jury from the state and district where this occurred. Find me 12 people who live in the Idaho portion of Yellowstone National Park." The judge can't, because they don't exist. Legal scholars have debated every angle. Could prosecutors argue the crime was planned elsewhere, making it a conspiracy? Maybe. Could they charge lesser crimes with different jurisdictional rules? Possibly. But the murder itself, the main offense, would remain unprosecutable. Some argue courts would find a creative solution, that judges wouldn't let the Constitution become a shield for murder. Others point out that's exactly when constitutional protections matter most, when they're inconvenient. How do we know it hasn't already happened? There have been disappearances near Yellowstone, unsolved cases, people who entered the park and never came back. Rangers will tell you the wilderness itself is dangerous enough. Falls, exposure, animal attacks. People die in national parks every year from natural causes. But could someone have exploited the zone, committed a crime, and simply left? We'd never know. Hasn't Congress fixed this? Ask 10 people, get 10 answers. Some say it's not urgent enough. No one's been prosecuted for a zone of death murder yet. Others point to congressional dysfunction, where even simple technical fixes die in committee. But there's a more uncomfortable truth. Fixing the zone of death might require Congress to examine similar jurisdictional problems across other federal lands. Military bases, Indian reservations, areas where state and federal boundaries create legal gray zones. Pull one thread, and a whole system of compromises might unravel. The zone of death has entered pop culture. The TV series Yellowstone features a location called the train station, a fictionalized killing ground with no law enforcement, no judge and jury of your peers. The 2016 film Population Zero imagines a triple murder in the zone. True crime enthusiasts debate it online. Law students write papers about it, and somewhere someone might be planning to test whether the theory holds in practice. Behind the legal theory are real people. Families who've lost someone in or near Yellowstone, victims of unsolved crimes. They deserve a justice system that works, not one with a 50-square-mile blind spot. Every day Congress doesn't act. The zone remains open. Every season without a fix is another opportunity for someone to exploit what Brian Colt discovered. Today, the zone of death looks exactly as it did when Colt discovered it. Peaceful, empty, untouched. Tourists hike near its boundaries without knowing what legal anomaly exists just beyond the trail marker. Brian Colt still advocates for the fix. He's given up on Congress acting proactively. Now he just hopes they'll act before they have to explain why they didn't. In his office back in 2004, Brian Colt had a moment that lasted maybe 5 seconds. The moment he realized what he'd found. The moment he understood that academic theory had become real-world danger. That moment changed him from a law professor writing about hypotheticals to someone desperately trying to prevent a tragedy. He tried to make it impossible for someone to commit the perfect crime. Instead, he may have drawn them a map. The zone of death isn't a myth. It's not sensationalized clickbait. It's a genuine constitutional problem that's been ignored for 2 decades. 50 square miles where America's justice system fails, where the Constitution protects the accused to the point of paralysis, where murder might be legal. The question isn't whether it could happen. The question is, has it already?